Hey guys, it's Mo from Mo in the Deep End, and as promised, I am getting into the Karen Reed case. So, we are going to start first with a little what in the world is Karen Reed case, and then we are going to try to get into, I believe this is the probable cause affidavit. I don't know. I am trying to go through and find the probable cause affidavit, but it is look, this is a rabbit hole. I am not going to lie to you. I am going through Turtle Boy's stuff. I am taking notes, and it is all of the shenanigans. So I am going to Court TV, and we are going to get kind of a little overview of what is going on first to get kind of the normie perspective before we go into the tinfoily, the government kind of weirdness and all the cover up stuff, which we will get into. I will be extensively kind of relying on Turtle Boy, so I might see if he has a much bigger channel than I am, but I might see if he will come on for an interview. I don't know, hopefully, maybe, fingers crossed. So let's see. Boston police officer's girlfriend is charged in his death, and this was posted at 7:20 AM on February 3rd, 2022. So I'm gonna guess Stoughton, Massachusetts. A woman who is accused of striking her Boston police officer boyfriend with her car outside his suburban home, leaving the area and then returning hours later to find him lying in the snow, pleaded not guilty to manslaughter and other charges at her arraignment on Wednesday. Karen Reed, 41, of Mansfield, is also charged with leaving the scene of a motor vehicle collision causing death and motor vehicle homicide in the death of Officer John O'Keefe, 46, during Saturday's nor'easter. She was released on $50,000 bail. Now, I will have to check into Massachusetts to see if she has to have, like in Wisconsin, it has to be the entire amount of bail, or if it can be like 10%, like 5,000, like it is in other states. But I don't know. I will check into that. I have my handy dandy notebook. Let me get a pen. O'Keefe, a 16-year veteran of the Boston Police, was found unresponsive outside a Canton home about 6 AM Saturday. He was taken to a hospital where he was later pronounced dead hours later. According to the prosecutor in Stoughton District Court, the couple had been to two bars and were heading to an after-hours party at a home. Reed said she did not feel well and decided not to attend. O'Keefe got out of the vehicle, and while making a three-point turn, Reed struck him, then drove away, the prosecutor alleged. She became frantic hours later when she could not contact him, so she went back to the home where she and two friends found O'Keefe. He died of head trauma and hypothermia, the prosecutor said. Reed's vehicle also had a broken taillight, authorities said. Her attorney said his client is distraught. The district attorney's office made a rush to judgment based on political pressure because of an officer's death, David Yannetti, maybe, said outside court. Quote, "My client has no criminal intent. She loved this man. She is devastated. She is innocent, and that will come out in trial." He said, "The Boston Police Department is, quote, stunned and saddened by O'Keefe's death," Superintendent Chief Gregory Long said in a statement. So it's interesting to see at the start of this how it's very cut and dry. It's, you know, this happened, this happened, this happened. And now the hearing that Baker and I saw, those were, eh, again, only being pre-medicalology and such, and Scientology, those are not. I am confused as to how those could be, car-related injuries. But, again, I am not. Quote, "The Boston Police Department continues to grieve over the tragic loss of our brother, police officer John O'Keefe. John was a kind person dedicated to his family and will be greatly missed by his coworkers and anyone who had the privilege of meeting him." Um, I'm gonna go ahead and call BS, but but that's because as you know, in my loving tribute of Dale Gribble, I choose to distrust everyone in the government. And oh dear Lord, this is, as I am scratching just the surface of this, none of this looks right. Not one doggone piece of this looks right. So let me get this particular. Now, I don't think that this is the actual probable cause affidavit, but this is what they have going. So while I couldn't get the probable cause affidavit, this is what is up on Scribd, and it seems to outline the events that they are using to convict her. And this is going to be a long video. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is going to be fairly long. Hopefully, I get done prior to um, today's, Black Widower. I have a couple more videos that I want to get done. I am trying to do several videos a day, kinda like the quartering. He is kind of my you know, I would like to be like him, do a little bit of current events, court style, not, you know. Alright, let's do this. So, uh, I'm gonna kind of skip this front part because I want to get into the facts part because I believe this is what is going to kind of act as our probable cause, because this up here seems to deal with more cell phones, and I understand that they're wanting to block certain cell phone data, but this facts part is going to be kind of more of our probable cause affidavit, it working probable cause affidavit, because I can't seem to find it. I will have to ask David is if there's a way I can find all the court documents on the internet. I might take a paralegal course just to be able to find documents easier because right now I'm having a heck of a time. But it also could be that I just, excuse me, stink at the internet. So facts. On January 29th, 2022, at approximately 6:04 a.m., the Canton Police Department received a 911 call from a woman reporting a male party, subsequently identified as the victim, John O'Keefe, found outside at, I'm not going to dox their interview. At the time of the 911 call, there was an active blizzard occurring with heavy snow and the temperature in the teens. Officer Sarif and Mulaney, both of the Canton Police Department, were dispatched to the scene along with Canton Fire and EMS. Officer Sarif was the first officer to arrive on scene, where he observed three females waving at him from the front yard area of the residence. Officer Sarif's cruiser camera footage was viewed by the grand jury in this matter and admitted as Grand Jury Exhibit 56, see attached. The footage depicts the weather and visibility conditions during the officer's transit and arrival to the scene shortly after the body of the victim was discovered and the 911 call was placed. Okay, I have questions, and this is not to victim blame or blame Karen and all of this, but and maybe this is a thing if you're in Massachusetts and, you have nor'easters all the time. Who the hell goes to a bar when you have a giant ass snowstorm? Maybe y'all are used to it. It's like in Indiana, you have crazy weather and you just get used to it, and maybe I'm just, like, you have 20 feet of snow, you stay the hell home. I mean, I'm a homebody. Maybe they're extroverts and they just go to the bar no matter what. That could be it. In the video, Officer Sarif can be seen utilizing the spotlight attached to the driver's side of his cruiser as attempts to locate the calling parties in the darkness and blizzard conditions. Looking at the residence from the street, the three females were in the left corner of the property in the area of the flagpole and fire hydrant. Officer Sarif observed the victim lying on the ground as two females were performing CPR on him. The three females on the scene were identified as the defendant, Karen Reed, Jennifer McCabe, and Carrie Roberts. Officer Sarif further observed the victim to be cold to the touch and not breathing. He returned to his cruiser to retrieve his AED device. However, at this time, Canton Fire and EMS arrived on scene and took over resuscitative efforts. Paramedics transported Mr. O'Keefe to Good Samaritan Medical Center in Brockton, where he was subsequently determined to be deceased by Dr. Justin Rice hours later. Lieutenant Paul Gallagher, Detective Sergeant Michael Lank, and Sergeant Sean Good, of, also of the Canton Police, arrived on scene moments after the 911 call had been received. Following the victim's transport from the scene, they began to search for any evidence around where Mr. O'Keefe had been discovered in the mounds of snow on the front lawn of the residence adjacent to the roadway. They located a broken cocktail-style glass and multiple patches of red that appeared to be bloody in the vicinity of where the body was located. The Canton officers secured the glass and 6 blood samples from the snow as evidence. So they have a cocktail glass. Did he steal a cocktail glass from the bar, or did he get in? I mean, so he's either driving with an open container, which is super de duper illegal in Indiana. I don't know how that works in any other state. Maybe it's totally fine in, Maryland or Massachusetts as long as you're a police officer. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm sure the police would never, ever abuse their, power and do something semi-illegal. Uh, but yeah, it's amazing that they could find the cocktail glass and the blood, but they didn't see the, supposed, broken tail light pieces there at this time. Again, I understand it's snowing and stuff, but they saw the cocktail glass and the blood, so theoretically, if he's been laying there and his body has covered up the snow, you know, and protected the cocktail glass and the blood, it should have protected at least some of that tail light if it's happened at contemporaneously to that. I'm trying to make sense of craziness, never mind. Later that morning, Massachusetts State Police Detective Unit of the Norfolk District Attorney's Office was notified and responded to the scene as well. Trooper Michael Proctor and Sergeant Yuri Buknik, y'all don't even I don't y'all that what is we don't even know. We're gonna say Bucknick, were among the troopers who responded and began interviewing the witnesses. They first spoke with Miss McCabe. Miss McCabe indicated she and some friends were at the Waterfall Bar and Grill during the evening of January 28th. She arrived with her husband at Matthew at approximately 9 p.m., following one of their children's high school basketball games earlier in the evening. At approximately 11, Mr. O'Keefe and Miss Reed arrived at the waterfall together. Miss McCabe stated that Mr. O'Keefe and Miss Reed had been in a dating relationship for approximately 2 years and that Miss Reed stayed at Mr. O'Keefe's house most nights. Miss McCabe observed Miss Reed walk into the bar holding a glass cup from C.F. McCarthy's with a clear liquid inside she believed was a vodka soda drink. Ugh, ain't no laws with them White Claws. She was white girl wasted. Lord, you can bring your own drinks to the bar? This sounds all sorts of ridiculous. Miss Reed had entered the waterfall with a glass inside her coat. Never mind, she done smuggled it. Mr. O'Keefe and Miss Reed's had been at C.F. McCarthy's, a bar across the street from the waterfall, prior to coming to the water. She done stole her a glass. Guilty. All the guilties. A bar across the street from the waterfall. Prior to coming to the waterfall, Miss McCabe observed Mr. O'Keefe to be wearing a baseball hat, jeans, and sneakers. She stated that the defendant and victim appeared to be in a good mood and did not observe any arguing between the two throughout the course of the evening. She further described the atmosphere within the bar to be friendly with no argument amongst any of the patron. The description of the group and the atmosphere within the bar and between the defendant and victims is consistent with each witness present that the troopers interviewed throughout the course of the investigation. As the bar began to close, everyone within the group was invited back to the house, the residence of Miss McCabe's sister, Nicole Albert, and her husband, Brian. She observed Mr. O'Keefe and Miss Reed to leave the waterfall together. So, y'all, they are all drunk and they are all gonna go driving. are all cops. Y'all, I am ticked off. Y'all no. I mean, or tipsy, but still, no. Miss McCabe was arriving at her vehicle. She received a text from Mr. O'Keefe asking where to at 11 or at 12:14 a.m. Miss McCabe replied with the address of where they were going. At 12:18 a.m., Mr. O'Keefe called Miss McCabe to ask more specifically where the house was located on Fairview. While inside the residence following her arrival, Miss McCabe observed a black SUV consistent with Miss Reed's vehicle, a 2021 black Lexus SUV, arrive at front of her residence from her vantage point at the front door of the home. Miss McCabe texted Mr. O'Keefe at 12:31 a.m., stating hello again at 12:40 a.m. Pull up behind me, referencing her vehicle's parking spot within the driveway to the home located on the right side of the property if looking at the residence from the street. Miss McCabe then observed the black SUV move from its original place where it had stopped on the street near the driveway and proceed to the left side of the property, where Mr. O'Keefe's body was subsequently discovered later in the morning. At 12:45 a.m., Miss McCabe texted Mr. O'Keefe again, hello, then observed the black SUV drive away from the home. At approximately 4:53 a.m., Miss McCabe stated she received a phone call from Miss Reed looking for Mr. O'Keefe. The phone call was placed by the victim's juvenile niece at the defendant's direction to Miss McCabe's cell phone. Miss McCabe answered the call from the defendant's niece, spoke to her briefly, and the niece, excuse me, the niece then handed the phone to the defendant. The defendant sounded distraught over the phone and drove over to Miss McCabe's home. The defendant told Miss McCabe that she last remembered seeing the victim at the Waterfall Bar. Miss McCabe then informed the defendant that she observed the defendant and the victim leave the bar together. Miss McCabe also later informed the defendant she had seen them in Miss Reed's vehicle in front of the home on Fairview. The defendant also informed Miss McCabe that she and the victim had gotten into the argument the last time she had seen them. The defendant arrived at Miss McCabe's home around 5:30. Shortly after the defendant arrived at Miss McCabe's home, Miss Carrie Roberts arrived there as well, as she had also received phone calls from the defendant that early morning looking for the victim. Miss McCabe then drove to Miss Reed's vehicle from her house back to Mr. O'Keefe's house, as she was too hysterical, and Miss Roberts followed along in her own vehicle. While driving to Mr. O'Keefe's house, the defendant stated to Miss McCabe, quote, I could have hit him. Did I hit him? Now, there's been some conjecture, especially on the pro Karen Reed side, that this woman who is driving her is a wife of one of the police officers that, possibly, maybe, might, could be involved in some of the shenanigans and planted these thoughts of Karen running him over in Karen's head. Now, I don't know, but it does seem like it would be the perfect time to start planting if you were so inclined. Um, but again, we don't have any evidence, and it seems like the state is really stalling on giving the defense evidence. So I don't know if they have anything yet to kind of defend themselves. Miss McCabe stated the defendant also told her about the cracked taillight. Again, this is all hearsay at this point. Miss McCabe is saying that she said this. And once they arrived at the victim's house, the defendant had Miss McCabe look at the cracked taillight, which McCabe described as the passenger side right rear taillight was cracked and missing pieces. Miss McCabe and the defendant entered Miss Roberts' vehicle to go looking for the victim. The defendant was seated, excuse me, within the back passenger side while Miss Roberts drove and Miss McCabe was seated within the front passenger seat. Miss McCabe stated they turned onto Fairview Road from Chapman Street, and at the time it was snowing heavily with the wind blowing, creating poor visibility. Miss McCabe stated just prior to 34 Fairview, there's a cluster of trees, and immediately the defendant stated she saw the victim. Now, it's blowing snow. You can't see anything in front of you, but through a cluster of effing trees, you're gonna see the victim? It's your house where the alleged victim met a untimely death that looks like it's from a daggone dog and a beating. It's snowing and you can't see, like, 2 feet in front of you, but through a cluster of trees, you definitely, definitely saw his body. Nope, nothing suspicious. Nothing suspicious here. This statement immediately confused Miss McCabe and Miss Rogers as they were, "Oh, so the defendant said she." No, Miss McCabe stated, so Miss McCabe said, okay, so McCabe is trying to say here, this is written very poorly, but what McCabe is saying here, claiming through this very poorly written statement, is that the defendant apparently through a cluster of trees found the body and was laying over him near a cluster of trees and tried to begin CPR. Miss McCabe stated the victim was laying on his back, covered with approximately 6 inches of snow, with his phone on the ground beneath him. The defendant yelled at McCabe twice to Google how long do you have to be left outside to die of hypothermia or something to that effect. On January 29th, the troopers reviewed Mr. Michael Matthew McCabe or interviewed Mr. Matthew McCabe separately from his wife. Mr. McCabe indicated he had known Mr. O'Keefe for approximately 8 years. He had misread a handful of times. He stated he was at the Waterfall Bar on Saturday night and observed the victim and the defendant enter together. He observed the victim to be wearing a baseball cap with a curved visor and Miss Reed to be drinking a clear liquid, possibly vodka. Mr. McCabe stated he left the bar at last from his group and headed to his in-laws' home. He entered his vehicle with his wife Jennifer and was on the phone with the victim telling him to go to the house. While at the Fairview residence, he observed a large SUV pull up in the front of the house on the street. He'd been looking out the front door through the glass storm door, describing the SUV's position as initially parked in front of the house. Mr. McCabe looked out the window some minutes later and observed the same vehicle had moved to the left side of the property. Minutes following that, he observed the same vehicle driving down Fairview, heading the same direction it had been facing while parked. Troopers also interviewed the homeowners of that particular house, Brian and Nicole Albert. Both confirmed that they had been at the Waterfall Bar the previous evening with family and friends and left around closing to return to their home. Throughout the evening, they both indicated that the victim and the defendant, neither of whom they knew particularly well, entered the bar and joined their group. They indicated that several people from the group had been invited back to their home following the bar, and several arrived staying for approximately 1 hour. Both indicated in their sworn testimony before the grand jury in this matter that their nephew, Colin Albert, while present at their home upon arrival, left their home well before any of their guests' arrival from the waterfall. Several other witnesses called before the grand jury similarly confirmed this. Neither were aware that the defendant and the victim had planned on coming over, although they had no issue had they been aware. Neither heard or saw anything outside of their home over the course of the evening until Miss McCabe awakened them. Prior to Miss McCabe entering their home and waking them up in their bedroom, Miss McCabe's cellular phone, which was downloaded by members of the Massachusetts State Police following her signed consent, shows phone calls from Miss McCabe's phone to Nicole and Brian Albert's phone. The first call to Nicole Albert occurs. Okay, so these are phone calls that basically she called to inform them that there's a dead body in your front yard. Like, can you imagine these poor people? I mean, unless they're shady AF, then I don't really. But I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt at this moment. It's a mo benefit of the doubt that they are not shady AF. They just wanted to have a little bit of an after party, which they didn't realize that they were all gonna be part of a shenanigans, and 5 a.m. in the morning, they are woken up to a dead body. The second call to Nicole Albert occurs at 6:08 PM or AM, 17 seconds, also listed as answered and lasts for a duration of 7 seconds. Troopers also interviewed Mr. Ryan Nagel. Mr. Nagel's sister, Julie, was also there at the evening of January 28th, visiting with Albert's son for his birthday. Mr. Nagel stated he had been contacted by his sister asking for a ride home. His friend drove with Mr. Nagel in the front passenger seat and his girlfriend in the rear cab of his friend's Ford F-150 pickup truck to the house. The truck was driving down Cedar Crest Road. He observed a set of headlights and a mid-size black SUV coming from the opposite direction on Cedar Crest. And the truck he was traveling in yielded to the SUV, making a right turn onto Fairview and followed behind it after executing its left turn onto Fairview. Mr. Nagel stated that the truck stopped directly in front of the driveway to the home and remembered the black SUV stopping right along the right-hand curb toward the left side of the property. He remained within the truck while his sister exited the home and asked them to come inside. He declined the invitation, and his sister eventually decided to stay home and make other transportation arrangements. As his sister returned to the house, Mr. Nagel observed the black SUV pull up to approximate 1.5 car lengths to the far left edge of the home's property, where the flagpole was located along with some bushes. He stated the SUV's driver did not appear to place the vehicle in park at any point. He observed it as the rear brake lights were illuminated throughout his observation to include the third top center light. Mr. Nagel reported hearing no noises coming from the interior of the SUV. Mr. Nagel indicated as his friend pulled away from the side of the road. When they were leaving, they drove past the black SUV. He observed the interior light on within the vehicle and a Caucasian female operator seated inside the vehicle, holding the steering wheel at 2 and 10, staring straight in front of her. The troopers also later interviewed Mr. Nagel's sister, Miss Juliana Nagel, as well as her friend, Sarah Levinson, both of whom had been present on the home on Fairview January 28th and 29th, both of whom had been given rides home by the McCabe's. Both indicated they had both been home on Fairview for Brian Albert Jr.'s birthday that evening. Both provided lists of other individuals there. Both indicated that Albert's Brian Nicole later and Brian Nicole arrived later in the evening from the waterfall and listed those in the groups to include the Alberts, the McCabe's, Mr. Higgins. Both indicated no one else entered the home while they were there and that they left and got a ride home from the McCabe's. Miss Levinson recalled the McCabe's saying that someone else was coming, however, that person never arrived. Juliana Nagel stated that she called her brother Ryan for a ride home at approximately 12 a.m. While waiting for him to arrive, she was looking out the kitchen window and observed an SUV stopped by the mailbox, with the front of the SUV facing Chapman Street. She said she further observed the SUV travel along the front of the house, stop between the mailbox and the flagpole. Where it came to a stop, she observed the SUV further pull up close to the flagpole and stop again. She went outside to speak with her brother and noticed it was lightly snowing at this time. After her brother declined her offer to come inside, she indicated to him that she would arrange an alternative way home. What a see you next Tuesday. She had her brother come all the way out to, pick her up at this place. And then, he didn't wanna come over to party, so she's like, "Nah, I'll find somewhere else to go some other way to come home." I would be pissed. I mean, if I were the brother, I'm just saying, I would be pissed. Miss Nagel said she left the residence in the McCabe's vehicle sometime between 1:30 and 2 AM with Mr. McCabe driving. Okay, so y'all are telling me you all left the front gosh dang door and didn't see a dude laying in the snow? Y'all are telling me this. How snookered were you? I'm sorry, but this is all screaming. And again, y'all saw the SUV. You saw the SUV. Uh, uh, I mean, I'm trying to use logic on a not logical situation, but you're telling me you see the SUV, you see her come park, you don't call and say, "Hey, dude, did y'all just decide to bail?" And, or call Karen and say, "Hey, did y'all decide to bail?" And when she says, "No, I dropped him off," and, you know, "Dude, don't come in," you don't have someone, like, send a search Donner Party for someone? For the love of Cheetos. I I mean, Darren Ruben Lopez put more freaking effort into, planning than these ding dongs do. With Mr. McCabe driving, Miss McCabe in the front passenger seat and her in the back driver's seat. Miss Levinson seated next to her behind Miss McCabe. Mr. McCabe reversed out of the driveway as they traveled past the house. Miss Nagel indicated she thought she saw something she described as a black object in the snow by the flagpole, but could not determine what it was. Dear Jabus. Later that day, January 29th, it's almost like these cops are not observant at all on purpose. Later that day, January 29th, troopers Matthew Dune and David DeVisio interviewed Miss Kelly Roberts. Miss Roberts stated that at approximately 5 AM, she received a call from the defendant stating John did not come home. It was snowing and she was worried. The defendant further stated to Miss Roberts, John's dead. Carrie, Carrie, I wonder if he's dead. It's snowing and he got hit by a plow. Miss Roberts got dressed and left her vehicle, eventually meeting the defendant at Miss McCabe's home, where she observed the defendant to be hysterical. Okay, y'all, I'm gonna tell you what. Look, I know this is probably like a trauma response, but if Mr. Mo is like late for 10 minutes driving or something, my mind goes first to he's dead. I am going to get those police, coming to my door. I am like, "F you, fate. I I'm gonna be ready for it this time. F you." Like, you're not gonna sucker punch me with surprise this time. Like, I see you coming this time. So, I'm sure a therapist would have a field day with me all the damn time. But, yeah, he comes home, like, 10 minutes late. I have already figured out, like, what I would do as a widow. Again, again, going to see a therapist soon. I'm just telling you that I don't see that as something super weird as a person that sort of sometimes does that all the time. To me, it is not super duper weird. I not not exactly to me, but I can understand if you've never been through that or something like that, it could seem very weird that that's what you jump to. Miss Roberts said believed the defendant was still intoxicated in the morning and told her she did not remember last night. Miss Robert reported the defendant as stating to her, quote, "I was so drunk I don't remember going to your sister's last night," referring to Miss McCabe's sister, the owner of the house. Miss Roberts followed the defendant's black SUV back to Miss O'Keefe's house. Okay, then why are you letting her effing drive? You psychos. They went inside the home for a period of time, looking for him with no avail, checking on the victim's niece. While at the victim's home, Miss Roberts stated that the defendant told her that and Miss McCabe about the cracked rear tail light, showing both of them that area of the vehicle. Miss Roberts then drove her vehicle with Miss McCabe in the front passenger seat and the defendant in the rear passenger side to the house. She and Miss McCabe were scanning the sides of the roadway along the drive looking for the victim while the defendant periodically screamed and texted on her phone as they drove. Miss Roberts described the weather as whiteout conditions as they were driving around. Uh, They arrived at the house. Miss Roberts stated the defendant screamed out, "There he is, I see him," from inside the vehicle and screamed to be let out. Even after initially exiting the vehicle, Miss Roberts stated she still could not see the victim in the conditions and further stated his body was covered in snow. She stated the victim's body was approximately 12 feet from the road. She observed him to have a swollen right eye with a laceration above it, blood around his nose and mouth. Miss Roberts stated they immediately began CPR and Miss McCabe called 911. Miss Roberts stated she observed the victim to be lying on his back and arms by his side. She noticed his right eye was swollen shut and there was blood coming from his nose and mouth. When paramedics arrived and lifted the victim's body onto the stretcher, Miss Roberts observed the grass underneath the victim's back, not covered in snow as the remainder of the area was. The defendant repeatedly asked Roberts, Miss McCabe, and the other officers on and paramedics on the scene, "Is he dead?" repeating that phraseology numerous times to each. The defendant further grabbed Miss Roberts by the arm at one point and asked if they were really working on John or if he was already dead. In addition, Trooper Bucknick interviewed Nicholas and Katrina. Y'all have to be kidding me. Kolakathis, both were present with the group at the waterfall on the evening of January 28th. They arrived at approximately 9 to 9:30, respectively, as they came in separate cars following their daughter's high school basketball game. They had known the victim for approximately 5 to 6 years. They had met the defendant a handful of times. I wonder how that came along, a handful of times. That's interesting. They stated that the victim and defendant arrived at the waterfall together at approximately 11 p.m., arriving from C.F. McCarthy's across the street. Miss Kalakathis, Kokolathis, Miss K, spoke for a period of time with the defendant and observed her to be drinking a vodka soda cocktail while at the bar. She also recalled the defendant pushing quite a bit for a member of the group, Christopher Albert, the owner of a local pizza shop, to go across the street after leaving the bar to keep partying while he made pies for everyone. When it was time to leave, Miss K indicated she was walking outside with Miss McCabe and observed the victim and the defendant walk out together and proceed to the left of the driveway and up Washington Street where their vehicle was parked along the curb facing up toward Waterfall. Miss K indicated that her vehicle was also parked along Washington Street but further down facing the opposite direction. She observed the defendant walking toward the driver's side of her Lexus SUV. She further indicated that during the course of her conversation that evening with the defendant complained about the victim's mother and the lack of private time the couple had for vacation because of their children, their activities and responsibilities. She also described her as fine and not did not believe that the defendant was overly intoxicated. On January 30th, troopers Bucknick and Proctor interviewed Canton firefighter Katie McLaughlin. She had been assigned to Station 1 on the 29th and indicated at approximately 6 a.m., Canton Fire and EMS had been dispatched to the house for a male party in the snow and unresponsive. Upon arrival, Miss McLaughlin observed the victim to have trauma on his face and eye area and vomit in his mouth. She observed the victim to be in jeans, socks, one black Nike sneaker. The victim's was cut, his chest exposed for chest compression. Miss McLaughlin had exited the ambulance to speak with the defendant as to the victim's identity and medical history. The defendant provided the name and date of birth. Miss McLaughlin asked the defendant if she knew where the victim had suffered the trauma to his face and eye, and the defendant turned to her friend and stated repeatedly, "I hit him, I hit him, I hit him," in response to the paramedic's question. I mean, look, if this is really what happened, then that's what happened, but look, the Dale Gribble, the tinfoil hattery, the absolute ridiculousness that is going on with the state not wanting to give things to the defense and taking forever and ever to do tests. I doubt that this is really what happened, but we'll go with it for now. We are going to dig more into this. This is what the state says. So, again, as David always says, at the end of the state stuff, we should think she's all the guilties, all the guilties. Following their initial witness interviews on the 29th, troopers Butnick and Proctor then proceeded to Good Samaritan to view the victim. They observed 6 bloody lacerations varying in length on his right arm. The cuts extended from his forearm to a bicep. Both of the victim's eyes were swollen shut, black and blue in the color. The troopers observed a cut to the right eyelid area of the victim. The victim's clothing, consisting of blue jeans, an orange t-shirt, a long sleeve gray shirt, and boxer shorts, were soaking wet and saturated with blood and vomit. The victim was also observed to have one black Nike sneaker with a white Nike logo on the side. The victim's medical records were admitted as exhibit before the grand jury in this matter as well. So that is something that we'll probably look at, and I will definitely put a warning on those because, Turtle Guide does have photos, and I will be using those, but not in a tawdry way, and I will definitely put warnings, and I will probably put those on Rumble, so that's just something. Throughout said medical records, the attending physician and medical personnel described the victim's injuries at length. Said descriptions of his injuries and medical conditions include right superior orbital region, approximately 7 millimeter laceration and surrounding soft tissue swelling. So, right orbital superior, so upper, so right here, and breath sounds bilaterally. He shouldn't have any breath sounds. Plus, breath sounds bilaterally. He should not have breath sounds, but superficial abrasions. On January 21st, Dr. Irene Scorsi Bello from the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner concluded the autopsy for Mr. Brian O'Keefe. The doctor advised troopers that she observed several abrasions to the victim's right forearm, 2 swollen black eyes, a small cut above his right eye, a cut to the left side of his nose, approximately 2-inch laceration to the back right of his head, multiple skull fractures that resulted to bleeding in the brain. Dr. Scordzi Bello. Okay, is it Bello with an O or Bello with a W? Look, you guys, I already mess up the names anyways. I need you guys to figure out if it's going to be an O or a W. Further advised the troopers that the victim's pancreas was a dark red color, indicating hypothermia was a contributing factor to his death. Dr. Scordzi Bello opined from her examination that significant blood force trauma injuries occurred prior to Mr. O'Keefe becoming hyperthermic, as evidenced by hemorrhaging in his pancreas and stomach. Mr. O'Keefe arrived at Good Samaritan Medical Center with his body temperature reading in the low 80s. The doctor opined that extensive injuries to his head likely rendered Mr. O'Keefe incapacitated. The doctor further opined, upon viewing Mr. O'Keefe's injuries and her examination of the body, she observed no signs of Mr. O'Keefe's being involved in any type of physical altercation or fight. I wonder why they put that in there from the beginning. It's almost like they wanted to make sure that no one asked that question. Hmm. In addition, Dr. Scorsibello testified extensively regarding her examination findings before the grand jury, as well as grand jury's exhibits 24, 26, and 27, as well as Dr. Scorsibello's report of the autopsy. In her testimony, the doctor described the medical definitions of laceration, contusion, and abrasion, as well as the differences of the three. The doctor testified that the victim had abrasions on his right arm. She described abrasions as scratches those are not scratches. Y'all have seen those pictures. I cannot. What in the world are they talking about? No. Let me pull this up because we've got I can't believe I've got to go full on Turtle Boy. Sorry, guys, but we got we got some splaining to do. But if you guys have seen the, and warning, these are pictures, so I'm going to try to again, these are pictures of the not alive body, so, you know, please, I'm going to just bear with me 1 second. I'm going to stop this screen, I'm going to present, and it should only be the arms, but they are saying these are abrasions. Now, from blunt force trauma. Now, we have seen I don't know how that can be blunt force trauma. Again, warning the I just y'all make it make sense. If you're gonna lie, again, if it's gonna be a robbler, make it make sense. So, let's go back. Dr. Scorsese-Bello testified throughout her external explanation or examination of the body. She observed no signs of an altercation or fight. She also testified extensively to the injuries or swelling of the victim's eyes. Scorsese-Bello testified that her examination of the victim, both external and internal, that the bleeding and subsequent swelling around his eyes were related to very small fractures in the skull. She testified specifically that the injuries initiated or started in the back of his head caused all the fractures in the skull. Then the eyes got red or black or purple because of the seepage of blood around small blood vessels. The neuropathology report completed by Dr. Renee Stonebridge, also at the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, are consistent with Scorsese-Bello's findings. Doctors that work at the same office coming up with the same sort of general idea because they work together. At approximately 4:30 on January 29th, troopers Butnick and Proctor arrived at the residence in Dingon, Maryland, the home of the defendant's parents. Upon their arrival, they observed a large black Lexus SUV registered to the defendant, parked outside the garage door in the driveway of the home. The troopers observed the right rear passenger side taillight to be shattered and a large red piece of plastic to be missing from the taillight. The troopers were invited into the home and observed the defendant seated on the living room couch. The defendant agreed to speak to the troopers. The defendant indicated to the troopers she had met the victim at C.F. McCarthy's bar in Canton at approximately 9 p.m. the evening prior. The victim had been there with friends prior to her arrival. She stated the victim was drinking beers and she was drinking vodka sodas. She described the glassware she was drinking out of as a vase style. The defendant stated she and the victim left C.S. McCarthy's and went over to the waterfall, but denied she had taken any drink from the bar to the one bar to the next. She stated they were at the waterfall for approximately 1 hour and during that time there were no arguments amongst anyone present there. When she and the victim were leaving the waterfall, she stated they were invited to a house on Fairview Drive. The defendant stated she had dropped the victim off at the house at Fairview and went home because she was having stomach issues at the previous bar. The defendant stated she dropped the victim off, then made a three-point turn in the street and left. She stated she did not see the victim enter the residence. The defendant stated she first observed the broken taillight in the morning and did not know how she'd broken it the previous evening. The victim was uninjured when she dropped him off at the house. However, she discovered him the next morning, observed him lying face up in the snow, his eyes swollen and blood coming out of his nose and mouth. She stated she began providing him mouth to mouth. The defendant further stated that she attempted to contact the victim throughout the night, calling and texting him numerous times with no response. She stated they had had a verbal argument that morning over what the defendant fed the victim's niece for breakfast. The trooper asked the defendant for further contact information relating to people that she had indicated were present at the bars. The defendant obliged, and prior to providing that said information, the troopers observed the defendant enter a numerical passcode into her phone to unlock it prior to retrieving the data. Get a lawyer, people. Do not talk to cops. Cops are cop are asshole. Cop are asshole. Don't do that. The black Lexus SUV was seized from the driveway of the defendant's parents' home in Dayton on January 29th. The vehicle was then transported via tow to Canton Police Department, where it sat for frickin' 18 months now doing gosh darn nothing. Members of the Massachusetts State Police Crime Scene Service Selection, a crime lab chemist, and Trooper Joseph Paul of the Massachusetts State Police Collision Analysis and Reconstruction Section, CARS, good lord, responded to the department. They observed fragments of broken glass on the rear bumper of the vehicle. The right rear passenger side taillight was shattered and pieces were observed missing from the red and clear areas. On the right side of the rear tailgate, a deep scratch and minor dents were observed. On the right side of the rear bumper, above the right small red light, 2 scratches were observed, as well as one area where the paint was chipped off. Trooper from the CARS unit performed a rapid acceleration forward and reversed test with the vehicle and noted no deficiencies within the vehicle's braking systems or otherwise. Troopers placed a training figure resembling a human, approximately 6 feet in height, behind the Lexus. A vehicle was operated by a CARS trooper and documented with a vehicle from the crime scene. The vehicle was placed in reverse and started to travel forward toward the training figure. A rear view camera within the vehicle was operating properly displaying on screen the center of the dashboard and provided a 360 overhead visual as the Lexus traveled closer to the figure. Both auditory and visual cues within the vehicle sounded off, indicating the obstruction rear. Well, okay. In addition, forensic scientist Maureen Hartnick responded to the Canton Police Department that day and took samples from the Lexus. She observed damage to the rear of the vehicle on the passenger side, including a dent with chipped paint on the trunk door and a broken taillight and scratches on the bumper. And apparent hair was noted on the rear passenger side quarter panel. Said apparent hair subsequently has been forensically tested and confirmed as a human hair. Apparent glass was also noted near the or on the rear bumper. On January 29th, the Massachusetts State Police Special Emergency Response Team was activated to assist in searching for possible evidence outside the house. Members from the CERT team located a black Nike sneaker with a white logo alongside, matching the one worn by the victim at the time the body was discovered. In the same area where the body had been recovered, 2 plastic pieces of the taillight were located, consistent to the pieces missing from the defendant's black Lexus. One piece of clear plastic taillight was located in the same area as well, consistent with the broken taillight of the Lexus. The CERT team discovered these items after digging through the still falling snow. On January 31st, investigators observed a video from Ring cameras affixed to One Meadow Avenue, a residence of Mr. O'Keefe. The video observed by utilizing the Ring application on the victim's cell phone. The data in the application showed that 2 cameras were connected to the victim's account under his email. The 2 cameras cover the front door and driveway of the home. From 6 p.m. on January 28th through 6 a.m. on January 29th, the Ring application showed approximately 15 events between the 2 cameras on the residence. Investigators observed on the Ring video from the driveway camera the defendant's SUV leaving the right garage door, traveling out of the driveway onto Meadow Avenue, turning onto Pleasant Street at approximately 9 or 8 5:08 a.m. on January 29th. Investigators were not able to locate any Ring video of the same SUV arriving at home prior to that. Specifically, no video of the defendant arriving to the victim's house after leaving the Fairview residence in the early morning hours of January 29th was contained within the available footage. The victim's Chevrolet Chevrolet Traverse SUV was parked in the right corner of the driveway as the defendant's SUV exited in reverse from the garage, coming close to the victim's SUV. As the defendant's vehicle exits the driveway, the troopers observed her right passenger taillight to be broken. On February 3rd, Trooper Evan Brandt from Crime Scene Services arrived with Trooper Proctor at the home and documented all sides of the traverse and the garage door. No damage was observed anywhere on either vehicle or the doors. No fragments or pieces of a broken taillight were discovered in the victim's driveway, nor are any observed on the ground or anywhere near in the driveway when the defendant's vehicle is seen leaving the driveway at 5:08 a.m. On February 1st, Trooper Butnick and Keefe traveled to C.F. McCarthy's bar and spoke with the manager at the bar. They reviewed and secured video from inside the establishment on the 28th and receipts. From interior surveillance video, the troopers observed Mr. O'Keefe walk into the establishment wearing jeans, black Nike sneakers, gray and a dark gray long sleeve shirt, dark baseball cap with an American flag on the front at approximately 7:37 p.m., along with his friend Michael Camareno. Approximately an hour later, at 8:51 p.m., the defendant enters the bar wearing a black jacket, black boots, black pants, a small handbag, purse, a white shirt underneath her jacket. 7 minutes later, at approximately 8:58 p.m., the bartender hands the defendant a tall style glass containing a clear liquid with a lime in it. At approximately 9:15 p.m., the victim hands the defendant a cylinder style glass with a clear liquid and a lime in it. At following times, troopers observed the defendant receiving a shot glass with a clear liquid in it, which she subsequently pours into her cylinder glass at 9:20, 9:33, 10:20, 10:90, or 10:29. Good lord. Okay, she must be a professional because good night, nurse. I don't know how she's driving, let alone standing, 'cause she's not a large woman, so professional drinker, here we go. At approximately 9:57 p.m., the bartender is observed handing the defendant a tall cylinder-style glass with a clear liquid in it and a shot glass with a clear liquid in it for a total of 7 drinks that the defendant receives and consumes during her time at this bar. At approximately 10:40 p.m., the victim and the defendant are observed leaving the bar, with the defendant holding her last drink in her right hand as they exit the door to the establishment. On February 1st, the troopers traveled to Waterfall Bar, reviewed and secured both interior and exterior surveillance camera footage, as well as receipts from that establishment. From the interior camera, the troopers observed the victim and defendant enter the bar at approximately 10:54 p.m. At approximately 12:10 a.m., the defendant walks out with 2 females leaving through the front door. Moments later, the victim is standing alone at the table, taking a sip from a short cocktail glass and walks out the front door holding the glass in his right hand. From the exterior camera, the troopers observe the victim walk out approximately 12:11 a.m. carrying a short cocktail glass in his right hand. These people are just stealing all the you know, if you own a restaurant or something, these people just are stealing your glasses. Also, ma'am is freaking sauced. Look, if she is innocent, she is still guilty of driving completely smashed. I'm sorry. She's lucky if this was a setup, if this was like, let's go full Dale Gribble, full Alex Jones, they're turning the frogs gay. Okay, let's go full that. She still drank way too effing much to be on the damned roads, and I hope she stops it because it is rarely ever the dead ass drunk person that gets, effing killed. It's always the full family of, like, Mormon church going families that gets killed, right? So, don't do this, ma'am, again. If you if it turns out to be a big giant conspiracy, don't, because you done got lucky. Don't do this again. And also stop stealing glasses. They restaurants and bars run on a very thin margin. Stop it. The hell is wrong with you people? On February 2nd, two troopers Dune and Moore were canvassing for video footage in relation to this investigation. They proceeded to Edward J. Lynch Jr. house at, oh, for the love of God, Pesquiside Farm on Pleasant Street in Canton, where they were able to receive video footage from the town's IT director, who confirmed that the date and time steps on the video were correct. Troopers also viewed and recovered from the video from Canton Town Library external cameras on February 3rd from Temple Beth Abrams, Benai, something in Hebrew. Both the library and the temple's cameras overlook Washington Street in Canton. The distance between these two buildings is approximately 1 mile. From the library's video at approximately 12:15 a.m., the troopers observed a large black SUV consistent with the defendant's Lexus driving on Washington Street and continued toward the temple 4 minutes after the victim and the defendant exited the waterfall. At approximately 12:17 p.m. or a.m. from the temple video, the troopers observed a large black SUV traveling by the building toward the intersection of Washington and Dedham streets in the direction of Fairview Road. From the library video at approximately 5:11 a.m., the troopers observe a large black SUV down Sherman Street, take a left onto Washington Street, and travel in the direction of the waterfall. At approximately 5:15 a.m., the troopers observe a large SUV traveling away from the area of the waterfall on Washington Street, crossing over Sherman, continuing on Washington toward the temple. From the temple video at approximately 5:18 a.m., the troopers observe a large black SUV traveling by the front of the building toward the intersection of Washington Street and Dedham Street. In addition, the troopers receive a search warrant, the defendant's Verizon cell phone records. Okay, here's the thing. Um, not that like black SUVs are that common, right? And Lexus black SUVs are all that common either. It just if they can put her there with her cell phone, yes. It's whiteout conditions and a nor'easter, and they're like, "Oh, but that's a black SUV." I am naturally just again, between CPS and the government overstepping in just about everything, I am about done with prosecutors here lately, so, um, them saying, "Oh, it's a black SUV," okie dokie. Lieutenant Brian Tooley of the Massachusetts State Police examined said records and was able to plot the defendant's movements while the phone was in use for various periods of time. The phone's movements coincided with the directions of travel the black SUV observed on the videos from the library and the temple during both time frames. These videos and phone records on the morning of January 29th occur after the defendant spoke with Miss McCabe on the phone after directing the victim's niece to call Miss McCabe. The defendant is seen at on the victim's residence rings video leaving the house at 5:08. Furthermore, the evidence really evidence. Proofread, people. If I have to read all 34 pages of your crap, proofread. We've already got like 3 different names for the medical examiner. Just y'all do your job, I'll do my job. Mine is making fun of you on the internet. I mean, we all have our jobs. The defendant traveling in the direction of the home on Fairview prior to going to Miss McCabe's house in the morning. On February 22nd, both the 10-year-old nephew of nephew CF and the 14-year-old nephew C or KF, of the victim interviewed at Norfolk Advocates for Children's Center in Foxborough, Maryland or Massachusetts. The children indicated they had lived with their uncle, the victim, for approximately 8 years following the passing of both their parents. Oh, dear Lord, this is awful. Oh, that's so awful. Both children indicated that the victim and the defendant had started dating approximately 2 years ago, after having dated some time before in the distant past. They both stated that the defendant would stay over at their house on Meadows Avenue several nights a week. PF stated that the defendant and the victim argued a decent amount of time. PF recalled a recent argument over groceries and the victim expressing a need for a break from the defendant. After a particular argument, the victim wanted the defendant to leave their house, however, they refused. PF indicated that he left the house on January 28th at approximately 8 p.m. for a sleepover at a friend's house and was not present at the house overnight. PF indicated that neither he nor his sister had access to the ring system, but believed that the defendant did from the family computer within the home. KF indicated during her interview that the defendant and the victim had argued a lot toward the end, approximately 2 to 3 times a week. She further stated that approximately a week prior to January 29th, she was sitting on the stairwell inside the house while the victim and the defendant were arguing. KF stated she heard the victim tell the defendant that their relationship had run its course and it wasn't healthy. She stated that the defendant did not want the relationship to end and refused to leave their house. KF stated she had gone to bed at approximately 11 p.m. on January 28th after the friend had left and was awoken by the defendant at approximately 4:30 a.m. with the defendant screaming and acting frantic. The defendant ran into the victim's bedroom to retrieve KF's cell phone, and KF began texting and calling the victim with no response. The defendant then had KF call Miss McCabe and put the defendant on the phone with her. After speaking with Miss McCabe, the defendant left the house and told KF to call Miss Cameron to come pick her up. KF indicated during her interview that the defendant changed her story several times while speaking with Miss McCabe on the phone, with initially the defendant stating that she and the victim got into an argument and she dropped him off. On January 29th, the troopers also recovered Mr. O'Keefe's cell phone and were subsequently able to forensically extract the data from said phone. Their forensic extraction of cell phone logs, voicemail, and text messages between the victim and the defendant include the date of January 28th and 29th. Details strains within their relationship, the victim's desire to end their relationship, and the defendant's description of their relationship with them and the two children together as toxic. The troopers recovered several voicemails from the victim's phone from the defendant following the time period. They were in front of the resident at Fairview, in which the defendant screamed to the victim she hated him. On January 29th, the defendant was transported from the scene um, to Good Samaritan Medical Center. While there, blood was drawn pursuant to her medical diagnosis and treatment at the facility. The ethanol results from the records indicate at 9:08 a.m. on the 29th, her blood reading had a 93 milligrams per deciliter. Nicholas Roberts, a forensic toxicologist from Massachusetts State Police Crime Laboratory, performed both a serum conversion and retrograde extrapolation said result, opining Miss Reed's blood alcohol level at that time on the 29th was between zero point 0.7 and zero point 0.8. His retrograde extrapolation analysis opined that her blood alcohol. Can they do that? I don't think they can do that. Here's the problem with that. That's math, and math is magic, and, I can't math, and, I mean, math can be manipulated, there's, lies, damn lies, and statistics. I I'm sure that the defense is gonna be like, "Screw that all the way." But she was hella drunk. None of these yahoos should have been driving. Not a one of them. Lastly, these facts were summarized from a grand jury presentation that spanned several months, at least 14 days of testimony, approximately 42 witnesses, and 1,445 pages of grand jury test transcripts and sworn testimony from said witnesses. So that's all of the stuff. Now, this is where they get into a bit of so this is where the defense is trying to take away some of the things that they're getting into. So this is already a pretty long video, but that's kind of what they are basing all of their stuff on. Now, where we get into the shenanigans and what I'm going to get into is I'm trying not to just steal, like blanket steal Turtle Boy stuff. So I'm trying to take what I'm getting, make notes, and then make it my own. But, you know, I, I somewhat lack free time sometimes. I know you're shocked, but this is what I'm trying to do. So, you know, again, after reading what they do have, it does seem like she is all the guilty, but I will start with kind of the opening salvo that Turtle Boy has and go through his, parts. He's up to part 93, so we're gonna have a heck of a lot to talk about, and I'll probably put up his pictures, but I'm going to try to take notes and kind of make it my own. That's my plan. Stan, that's what I'm gonna do. But that is I told you guys I would dive into this, so that's what I'm going to try to do, and I hope you enjoy it, and remember, guys, you may not be everyone's cup of tea, but you are always welcome here. We love you. We are your odd family. We accept you here. We love you. I'll see you later. Bye.